really get in the nitty-gritty of things.
That's right. We do a deep dive into the information you send us.
I'm Chris Clarity.
I'm Paige Turner, and
today we are talking about something that's been on a lot of people's minds, I think.
Yeah.
And that is the increasing militarization of space.
It's pretty scary stuff.
A lot of us grew up thinking about, the final frontier exploration.
Yeah, peaceful.
Star Trek, right? All that. But it seems like things are taking a bit of a darker turn.
It's not really science fiction anymore. It's becoming a reality.
No, it's not. And you've given me a ton of research on this. Reports on secret satellite programs, analyses of legal loopholes that are being exploited, even speculation about AI-driven space wars.
It's like we're sleepwalking into a sci-fi thriller.
It is. It really is. And I think what's so unsettling about it is that it's happening so quietly, right? Like most people have no idea about this silent arms race that's unfolding above our heads.
They're too busy looking down at their phone.
Exactly right, yeah.
To even notice what's going on up there.
So let's break this down, and maybe we start with one of the things that I found most unsettling in the research you gave me, and that is the U.S. Air Force's X-37B spaceplane.
Oh, yeah, that thing is creepy.
This thing is like straight out of a movie. It really is.
It's an unmanned space plane.
Yeah.
It can spend years in orbit, maneuvers autonomously without any input from the ground. Like, what?
Like, nobody's driving this thing.
And nobody knows what it's doing up there, really.
Well, there's the thing, right? The Air Force says it's for, like, testing new technologies. But
come on.
That's such a vague explanation that it leaves the door wide open for all sorts of speculation.
Exactly. Some people think it's testing directed energy weapons.
Right? Lasers that could take out other satellites.
Or some kind of advanced surveillance equipment.
Right. Or even systems to jam enemy communications. Who knows?
It's spooky.
And I think that's the thing that's so unsettling, right? Is the lack of transparency. It's just fuel for conspiracy theories. And it makes you wonder, what are they really up to?
It makes you think, are they violating the Outer Space Treaty?
Right, which was designed to ensure the peaceful use of space.
Yeah, but this thing, it's not explicitly addressed in the treaty.
So it's like a loophole.
It's a loophole big enough to fly a space station through.
And it's not just the X-37B that we have to worry about. You've also given me some information about Russia's Cosmos satellites, particularly Cosmos 2x43.
Yeah, that one was a real wake-up call. They basically tested a weapon system in space.
Really?
Yeah, they released this projectile at high speed. It created a debris field that threatened other satellites.
So they're blowing things up in orbit.
Pretty much.
And that debris, that's terrifying, because that could set off a chain reaction of collisions.
That's the Kessler Syndrome.
Yeah, I've heard of that. And it's basically like a domino effect, where one collision leads to another, and it could eventually make space unusable.
Yeah, imagine like a cloud of shrapnel whizzing around up there, just taking out everything in its path.
That's a terrifying thought.
It's a real possibility, and that's why this whole space arms race is so dangerous.
And it's not just the U.S. and Russia we've got to worry about. China is getting in on the action, too. You mentioned the Shenzhen-17 satellite with its robotic arm.
Oh, yeah, that thing.
And again, they claim it's for peaceful purposes like repairing satellites.
But could it be used to tamper with other countries' satellites?
Yeah, maybe steal technology or disable sensors.
Exactly. It's like they're playing a game of cosmic cat and mouse up there.
It's like every advancement in space technology just becomes another potential weapon.
It's a dual-use technology problem.
So we've got all these major powers developing these advanced technologies, and nobody's really talking about it.
There's no transparency.
It's all happening behind closed doors, and it's creating this climate of fear and mistrust.
And it feels like we're on the brink of something really bad.
It does. And what's even more concerning is that it's not just governments anymore. Even private companies are getting involved. You mentioned SpaceX.
Oh, yeah. SpaceX, the darlings of the new space race, right?
Right. Reusable rockets missions to Mars.
Yeah. But they've also got this program called Starshield.
Starshield.
It's basically their military branch. They're providing encrypted communications and Earth observation services to the Pentagon.
Using their Starlink satellites.
Right. So are they a private company or an arm of the military?
It's a blurry line, isn't it? And that raises some serious questions about who's really in control and what are their intentions.
Yeah, there have been reports that Starshield could be used for surveillance.
And there are concerns about backdoor access for intelligence agencies. It's like this whole public-private partnership is blurring the lines even further.
And it's happening without any real public debate or oversight.
So we've got a lot to unpack here. Secretive government programs, weapons tests in orbit, the potential for these catastrophic chain reactions, and now private companies getting involved in the military-industrial complex. It's a lot.
It's a recipe for disaster if we don't change course.
All right, so we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll delve deeper into how we got here, what the potential consequences are, and most importantly, what we can do to prevent space from becoming a full-blown war zone.
Stay with us. So before the break, we were talking about how this whole situation with space is kind of spiraling out of control.
Yeah, it's a mess.
And one of the things that I think is adding to the problem is this trend of public-private partnerships in space.
Like SpaceX working with the Pentagon.
Exactly. And I know that might sound a little counterintuitive, right? Like, how could that be part of the solution?
Yeah, I'm a little skeptical myself, to be honest.
But think about it. These companies like SpaceX, they're already major players in space, both civilian and military.
Right.
So if they were to be more transparent about what they're doing.
You mean like hold a press conference?
More than that, I'm talking about like real transparency, maybe setting up a civilian advisory board for their Starshield program, kind of like what they have for Starlink.
So like an independent group that can keep an eye on them.
Yeah. Review their military contracts, provide some oversight and insight into their technology.
I mean, I guess that's better than nothing.
It's a start, at least.
Okay, but what about actual enforcement, right? Like, is there any way to make these countries and companies behave responsibly in space?
Well, that's the tough question, isn't it? There's no easy answer, but there are some efforts being made, like the Artemis Accords.
Artemis Accords.
Yeah, it's an international agreement led by NASA.
Okay.
It's got like 34 countries signed on so far.
And what does it do?
Well, it emphasizes peaceful exploration, and bans territorial claims on the moon and Mars, things like that.
Sounds good so far, but can they actually enforce any of this?
That's the problem. It's mostly based on diplomatic pressure, name and shame tactics.
So no real teeth?
Not really, but it does show that there's a growing international consensus that we need some rules of the road in space.
I guess that's a start.
Right, and some countries are taking it a step further, like France. They actually have a space command that can impose fines on operators who don't follow debris mitigation guidelines.
So they're putting their money where their mouth is.
Exactly, they're taking it seriously.
What about the EU? I know they've been talking a lot about space sustainability.
Yeah, they proposed this code of conduct for space sustainability back in 2023.
What does that do?
Well, it aims to prevent harmful interference with satellites, promotes transparency by encouraging countries to share their orbital data, things like that.
Sounds promising. But is it enough?
Well, the problem is it's voluntary. There are no penalties for violating it.
So it's more like a suggestion.
Pretty much, and some key players like China and India haven't even signed on.
So it's a step in the right direction, but...
But it's not a silver bullet.
No, it's not.
And it just shows how hard it is to get everyone on the same page when it comes to space.
Yeah, it feels like we're trying to solve 21st century problems with like 20th century tools.
It's like we're bringing a knife to a gunfight.
Exactly, and it's pretty overwhelming, to be honest.
I know it can feel that way, but there are some reasons to be hopeful.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
Well, one thing that's really inspiring is the work of Students for the Peaceful Use of Space. SPUS.
SPUS. Yeah, I've heard of them.
They're this global coalition of STEM students who are really passionate about making sure that space is used for good.
So they're like the next generation of space advocates.
Exactly. And they're not just talking, they're taking action. They're organizing protests, developing tools to track military satellites, even putting pressure on universities to divest from companies involved in space weaponization.
Wow, they're really putting in the work.
They are, and they give me hope that a more peaceful future for space is actually possible.
It's good to know that someone's fighting the good fight.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so we've talked about the threats, the challenges, some glimmers of hope, but what can we as individuals actually do to make a difference here? It all feels so big and out of our control.
Well, first and foremost, stay informed.
Okay.
Read articles, listen to podcasts like this one,
Right.
Follow the work of organizations like SPUS, the Secure World Foundation. The more you know, the better equipped you'll be to advocate for change.
Knowledge is power.
Exactly. And then talk to your elected officials.
Okay.
Support organizations that are working for space sustainability. Tell your friends and family about this stuff,
Spread the word.
Right. Make it clear that you care about the future of space and you want to see it remain a peaceful domain.
It's easy to feel like one voice doesn't matter, but...
But it does. Every voice counts. The more people who speak up, the more pressure we can put on those in power to actually do something about this.
So it's not just about preventing conflict. It's about making sure that space is used for the benefit of all humankind. not just for nationalistic ambitions or corporate profits.
That's right.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we've talked about the problems, the potential solutions, the role of individuals, but what about the future? Like, what does a positive future for space look like if we can actually manage to prevent this arms race from escalating? What are the possibilities?
Well, there are some really incredible opportunities on the horizon. One of the most exciting is quantum encryption.
Oh, yeah, I've heard about that. Isn't that like super secure communication?
It is. It's called quantum key distribution, or QKD, and it uses the principles of quantum mechanics to create encryption keys that are basically impossible to break.
So, like, unhackable communication.
Pretty much. And that could be a game changer for space.
Yeah.
You know, imagine satellite communications that are virtually impenetrable to hacking. That would be huge for peaceful uses of space.
It sounds almost too good to be true.
I know, right? But there's a catch.
Oh, there's always a catch.
Some experts worry that quantum encryption could also be used for military purposes, you know?
Of course.
It could give one nation a significant advantage in terms of intelligence gathering or something like that.
So, another example of how even a seemingly positive technology can have unintended consequences.
Exactly, and that's why it's so important that we have these conversations about the ethics of technology and that we involve a diverse range of voices in the decision-making process.
Okay, so quantum encryption, another powerful tool that could be used for good or evil. What other technological advancements are on the horizon that could shape the future of space?
Well, another one that's really exciting is space-based solar power, or SBSP.
At BSP.
It's basically capturing solar energy in space and beaming it wirelessly back to Earth.
Well, that sounds like science fiction.
I know, right?
Yeah.
But it could be a reality, and it could potentially solve our energy crisis and help mitigate climate change.
So clean, limitless energy from space.
Exactly. It sounds pretty amazing, right?
It does, but are there any downsides?
Well, of course, scaling up SBSP to meet global energy demands would be a massive undertaking. It would require a lot of investment and international collaboration, and there's also the risk of weaponization.
Right, someone could turn that energy beam into a weapon.
Exactly. Or it could create these space-based energy monopolies where certain countries or corporations control the flow of energy.
So it's another example of how technology is a double-edged sword.
It is, and it's why we need to be so careful about how we develop and use it.
We need to make sure that these technologies are used for the benefit of all humankind, not just for profit or national advantage.
Absolutely.
This has been a really thought-provoking conversation. It's clear that we're at a pivotal moment in history when it comes to the future of space. The choices we make now will have a huge impact on generations to come.
I agree. The stakes are incredibly high, but I do believe that a more peaceful and sustainable future for space is within our grasp.
I hope you're right.
Me too. And it's going to take all of us working together to make it happen.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We've been talking about this whole space arms race, and, you know, it's a lot to take in. It really is kind of scary. But before we wrap up, you gave me some information about what some experts are saying about all this, and I think it'd be good to get their perspective.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, hearing from people who are really in the trenches, you know, working on this issue every day can give us a much better understanding of what's at stake.
Absolutely. One of the experts you highlighted was Dr. Moriba Jah. He's a leading expert on space debris tracking, and he's been pretty outspoken about the need for more transparency in space.
Oh, yeah. Dr. Jha is amazing. He's like the go-to guy when it comes to space junk.
Right. And, you know, we're putting all this stuff up there, satellites, rockets, you name it, and most of it just stays up there orbiting the planet, creating this ever-growing cloud of debris.
Yeah, and it's only getting worse with all these new mega constellations being launched. You know, thousands of satellites all at once.
Right, like Starlink and all that. And, you know, Dr. Jha has said that without greater transparency about what's happening in space, we're sleepwalking into a disaster.
He actually had a really powerful quote about that. He said, we're building a digital twin of Earth's orbit with astrograph tracking 48,000 plus objects in real time. The data doesn't lie. 30% of anomalous satellites are military. Without transparency, we're sleepwalking into Kessler Syndrome.
So basically, he's saying that we're on a collision course with disaster if we don't start taking this debris problem seriously, and that the lack of transparency from the military is a big part of the problem.
Yeah, and he's also pointed out that, you know, even technologies that could be used for good, like quantum encryption, you know, which we talked about earlier.
Right, supposedly unhackable communications.
Yeah, well, he's worried that it could also be used to create new forms of dominance, you know?
Like a new kind of arms race.
Exactly. He had this quote that really stuck with me. He said, quantum encryption is a double-edged sword. It could secure peace or entrench dominance. Imagine if one nation controls the quantum backbone. It's the new nuclear triad.
Wow, that's chilling.
Yeah.
So even with something like quantum encryption, which has the potential to make things more secure, there's still this underlying fear that it could be used for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, it's like a constant tension between the potential for good and the potential for harm. And it's something we have to be really mindful of as we develop these new technologies.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've heard from Dr. Jha, who's, a leading voice in the space community, but I think it's also really important to hear from the younger generation, the people who are going to inherit this whole mess.
Definitely, they're the ones who are going to have to live with the consequences of our actions today.
Right, and one of the groups that you highlighted is Students for the Peaceful Use of Space, SPUS.
Yeah, SPOS is amazing. They're doing such important work. They're really trying to change the conversation about space, make it more about cooperation and sustainability.
Yeah, they're not just accepting the status quo, they're actually fighting for a better future.
And they're not afraid to call out the powers that be, challenge the military-industrial complex and really push for a more ethical approach to space exploration.
You mentioned that the co-founder of SPUS, Dr. Ayesha Patel, had a really interesting quote about space-based solar power, SBSP.
Yeah, Dr. Patel is brilliant. She's really passionate about making sure that space benefits everyone, not just a select few.
And SBSP is that idea of, collecting solar energy in space and beaming it back down to Earth.
Right. It has the potential to provide clean energy to the whole planet. But Dr. Patel is worried that it could also exacerbate existing inequalities, if it's not done right.
So like the rich countries and corporations end up controlling this new energy source, and the poor countries get left behind.
Exactly. And she had this really great quote about it. She said, SBSP should be a global commons like Antarctica, but without treaties, it'll replicate Earth's inequalities. Our Orbital Witness app lets citizens track SBSP projects. Sunlight shouldn't be patented.
Wow. So she's advocating for a more equitable approach to SBSP,
Yeah.
making sure that everyone benefits from this incredible technology.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important message. We can't just assume that technological progress will automatically lead to a better world. We have to actively work to make sure that these advancements are used for the benefit of all humankind.
Well, this has been a really intense, but also really important conversation. It's clear that the future of space is at a crossroads, and the choices we make now will have a profound impact on generations to come.
Yeah, it's a lot to think about, but I do believe that a more peaceful and sustainable future for space is possible.
Me too, but it's going to take all of us working together to make that happen.
Absolutely. We need to stay informed and engage in these conversations and hold our leaders accountable.
And we need to support organizations like SPUS that are fighting for a better future for space.
Yeah, because the future of space is literally in our hands.
Well said. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the militarization of space. We hope you found it informative and thought-provoking. And if you did, please share this episode with your friends and family. And let's keep this conversation going, because the more people who are aware of what's happening, the better equipped we'll be to shape a positive future for this incredible frontier. So until next time, keep looking up and remember, the future of space is what we make it.